It's the Vagilantes! Hi everyone, I really want to have an intro today, and since we don't edit these videos to preserve authenticity, I just wrote it out on a piece of paper. So, today I wanted to talk about something that's really important to me, a part of my identity that really penetrates my whole world. This week, Katie, Maggie, and I are talking about our quirks, or really parts of our identities that tie into our reproductive health work and how they influence the perspectives that we have on reproductive health. For me specifically, I'm going to talk about being South Asian. As many of you may already know, I'm South Asian. I can't really hide it. I'm Indian specifically. I was born in India, and I immigrated to the States when I was 5 years old. Being Indian really penetrates every part of my life. It's not something I can hide. People see it on my face, they read it in my name, they stumble over it when they say my name. It's really something that permeates all parts of me. English is also my second language. I didn't learn it first. I originally speak Telugu, which is one of the fastest growing languages in the United States. So being South Asian, specifically Indian, in reproductive health has been particularly challenging for me. I started out in reproductive health when I was really young. I think I was 10 when I knew I wanted to be a gynecologist, and I was around 15 when I started doing my first reproductive health work, which was my podcast, and then I've just been getting really into it since then. And all of this time, I didn't really notice how there was such a lack of Indian women, South Asian women in the reproductive health fields. All this time I was just doing reproductive health because I thought it was important. I thought that reproductive health in general was important for all people, and I never really saw my ethnicity as a barrier for me. As I grew though, and as my mom in particular realized that this passion was a real passion for me and a real career path that I wanted to pursue, she became a little more afraid, not just for herself, but for me. She was scared of how people in the Indian community would react to my love of reproductive health, to my intense passion for reproductive health and the work that I've done in the sex ed field. But I really have to give a big shout out to my mom as being one of my biggest supporters, because no matter what I wanted to do, no matter how I wanted to do it, she would always be there for me, and she would always tell me that it was so important. So slowly, I started doing reproductive health, not in spite of my ethnicity, but because of it. South Asia, India in particular, is one of the most dangerous countries in the world for women, and it's not very developed in terms of reproductive health education, and certainly could use more sex education, just like everywhere else in the world. But for me, it was so important to do reproductive health work for my community, because there's such a lack of South Asian people doing reproductive health that it's important for me to be kind of that person that people can see and think, oh, it's okay to go into reproductive health even if you're a person of color or someone who's South Asian. Certainly, coming from a more restrictive culture has really had an influence on the way that I do reproductive health. Throughout the years, my reproductive health curriculum and syllabus has gotten a little more palatable. It's gotten a little more conservative before I jump right into the heavy stuff. And I really have to attribute that to wanting to persuade people to get more into reproductive health, and specifically to persuade South Asian people. I think it's so important, especially in my own community, to be involved in reproductive health. I'm also an immigrant, and I know how difficult that can be to get into reproductive health, to understand sex education, especially because it's something that's so taboo in so many different immigrant communities, and especially because there's so many things on the minds of immigrants. I know for me it was my immigration status, my visa status, how am I gonna learn a new language, a new culture, and how am I going to mesh, and reproductive health, sex education was really in the back of my mind then. But it's something that's so crucial, it's something that's so biologically important to all of life, really, that it's so important to know, and oftentimes in those communities, it's considered taboo. So on top of all of the stress that people have when immigrating to a new country, they're less likely to seek out sex ed information because it's considered taboo, not just neutral, but negative in their communities. And I think it's just so crucial because that's the one thing that people should know about themselves, about their bodies. Because when you give people the autonomy of knowledge over their bodies, you give them the autonomy of knowledge to make their own decisions, which can be so important being in a new country. Some of my most distinct memories being someone South Asian in reproductive health, I've definitely had a lot of older people in the Indian community, we call them aunties, tell me that I should pursue an easier career field than gynecology, or that I should pursue a more lucrative career field, or I should do something that's less taboo, or something that has less of an impact socially on people. Someone told me maybe you should pursue orthopedics, to which I responded, I don't care about bones, sorry. And it's just, we've gotten a lot of little quips from people saying like, oh, you know, why are you doing this? My mom particularly has heard, why are you letting your daughter do this? And things of that nature. And certainly being a South Asian woman exacerbates that because there's still sometimes a perception that women should have kids, be housewives, stay at home, and that being a doctor might be too ambitious, especially a doctor that is predominantly in reproductive health or gynecologic issues that can have a huge social impact. What I see a lot from the South Asian community is that I, as a South Asian woman, am told to keep quiet and certainly not advocate for something as radical as reproductive rights. And it has certainly been difficult for me. I've certainly faced challenges that are unique to the experience of being a South Asian woman in reproductive health. I remember when I was doing a sex ed study on teen sex ed in North Carolina that I eventually published and presented and received an award for. I'll link the publication down below. I remember somebody telling me that people, women in particular, who are in reproductive health are often smeared by the work that they do. So they're seen as more promiscuous than they are, they're seen as less moral than they are, and they're seen as more sexually available, which is not a bad thing, but they're generally seen as more less pious or more unsavory than they actually are. And in the South Asian community in particular, gossip travels very quickly. So I certainly know of times when people have mentioned that I'm a lot more promiscuous or a lot more sexually open than I am. But none of that is true to what I know. So for me, one of the driving forces of keeping myself in reproductive health and keeping myself so ardently advocating for a cause I believe so much about is certainly my own personal moral compass. I do what I think is best until I know to do better. And in that process to try to learn and grow, it was so important for me to grow a thick skin and to be really immune to the comments that people were hurling at me and be really sort of on my own path and guiding myself, because I know the work that I do is important. And other people can say what they want to say, and it just really rolls off my back at this point. But when I was first starting out, it was certainly very difficult, because everyone cares what people think of them, and so I think being in reproductive health, one of the biggest gifts I've received from this work is the ability to be confident in myself and my abilities, and I hope to give that confidence to other people that are wanting to get into reproductive health, especially people of color and especially young South Asian women. We need to be more interested in reproductive health. We need to shape the way our communities think about reproductive health, because only when we address the source of the problem at the root, the source of the lack of education at the root, can we shift our cultural norms around women and girls and really liberate women, girls, people with internal reproductive systems, and that's something that's so crucial, especially for people of color and especially for South Asian women. And as always, if you have any questions or comments about this video or any of our other videos, if you'd like to get in touch with me, Maggie, or Katie, please let us know. And I hope you've enjoyed this unique take on some of the struggles that I've experienced with a part of my identity in reproductive health. And Maggie, Katie, I'm really interested to see what your personalities have led you to believe in the reproductive health field, and I'm really interested to see what you two are going to talk about. So back at ya!